Hello, and welcome to the Truly News Podcast. These podcasts are available every day starting at 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central, 5 a.m. Mountain, and 4 a.m. Pacific. You can find your podcast at trulynews.org, on Spotify, and at Apple Podcasts. To support this program, go to trulynews.org or support us on Patreon. This program is produced by the Civic Health Coalition, a nonprofit, so contributions are tax deductible. We start each podcast with a brief introduction in case you are listening for the first time. If you have heard the introduction and want to skip ahead to the news, then go to 2 minutes and 35 seconds in the podcast. That is where we begin our coverage of today's news. This podcast was created as a way to provide you with the important news of the day. But more importantly, it was created as a new way to receive the news, a source of news that presents information in a positive and impartial way. Unfortunately, many headlines and articles usually focus on the negative aspects of the news. Sensationalism and controversy are used to grab people's attention. However, for us, the consumers of that news, that negative focus can impact our emotions and mental health by creating feelings of anxiety, agitation, and even anger. As an alternative, we review the news for you and filter it in a way that keeps you informed, but does so in a fresh, positive, and healthy way, the way that news was truly meant to be. Using many different news sources from many different types of news organizations, we also try to provide an unbiased and broad overview of the day's news. We don't skip any issues because it may not be good news. We simply present everything in a calm, rational, and objective way. The first part of the podcast focuses on the top headlines from over a dozen different news sources. Those news sources include the top-rated news channels, the largest newspapers from across the country, and the top visited news websites. After reviewing the major headlines, we then review a broad spectrum of news that covers the categories of science, technology, economics, health, and world events. Finally, we conclude our podcast with a feel-good news, which are stories from across the country that highlight the positive things that people are doing. The types of stories that inspire, uplift, make us feel positively connected to the rest of the world and to humanity. So, now that you understand the purpose of this podcast, we begin today's episode. Happy Wednesday morning from the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains in beautiful Colorado. It is Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, and this is Truly News. I am your host, Jason Van Sickle. I hope that your week is going well. We are halfway through the work week. For those working from home, I wish you well while socially distancing. For those who are staffing our grocery stores, restaurants, and other essential businesses, be safe, and thank you for all that you do. Now let's take a look at today's top headlines. Former Louisville officer is indicted in Breonna Taylor case. The indictment was for wanton endangerment. 2 other officers who fired shots were not charged, and no one was charged for causing Mrs. Taylor's death. The Wall Street Journal reports California to ban sales of new gas-powered cars starting in 2035. Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order requiring all passenger cars sold in the state to be zero emissions by 2035. From Reuters, Michigan aims for carbon neutrality by 2050. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer on Wednesday signed an executive directive setting a goal for the Midwestern state to become carbon neutral by 2050, the 9th state to take on this target. Also from Reuters, Eric Trump to be deposed by October 7th in connection with New York probe. A New York judge on Wednesday ordered President Donald Trump's son Eric to make himself available by October 7th to be interviewed under oath for a state probe into financing of properties purchased by his family's company. Finally from Reuters, CDC chief expects most Americans to be vaccinated for COVID by July. A top U.S. health official told a U.S. Senate committee on Wednesday that he expects COVID-19 vaccines to take place over many months and that most Americans could be vaccinated by July of next year at the latest. And those are your top headlines from across the country. To lighten things up, it is now time for our daily Top 5 Joke Countdown. These jokes come from Reader's Digest at rd.com, which has an archive of thousands of jokes. Warning: some of these jokes have been altered in my futile attempt to make them even funnier. Our category today is coffee jokes, and here is your top 5 countdown. Number 5. Why do they call coffee mud? Answer: because it was ground a couple of minutes ago. Number 4. Have you heard of the law of coffee? It states that when you sit down and enjoy your coffee, someone, whether it is your boss at work or your kids at home, will ask you to do something which will last until the coffee is cold. Number 3. What's the opposite of coffee? Answer: sneezy. Number 2. Why are Italians so good at making coffee? Answer: because they know how to espresso themselves. And your number 1 coffee joke of the day. A barista asked the next customer in line, "How do you take your coffee, sir?" "How do I take it?" the customer replied. "Well, I take it very, very seriously." Okay, you made it through another countdown. Thanks for hanging in there. Whether or not you LOL'd, hopefully you at least cracked a smile. As always, look for ways to keep life fun, and in these difficult times, look for the opportunities to let yourself feel lighthearted and okay. There are many beautiful things in this world that deserve our attention, especially if they can create a smile or generate laughter. Now on to today's science headlines. From National Geographic, a colossal crater has been found in Siberia. The gaping hole is likely from an explosive combination of gas, ice, and mud, and the process might become more common as the climate changes. From Live Science, gold miners discover 100 million year old meteorite crater down under. Gold miners in the Australian outback recently discovered a gigantic meteorite crater dating to about 100 million years ago, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. The meteorite may have been larger than 2 football fields. From Science Magazine, a $1 hearing aid could treat millions with hearing loss. As an undergraduate in Mumbai, India, Saad Bamla wanted to do something nice for his maternal grandparents. He wanted to buy them a pair of hearing aids, but the prices were shockingly high and far beyond his means. Now, 15 years later, the bioengineer has invented a device to help grandparents across the globe, a do-it-yourself hearing aid made from inexpensive, easy-to-find parts. The no-frills device, described in a new study, could help restore hearing to millions suffering from age-related hearing loss, and all for less than the price of a bottle of water. And that is your science news for today. In technology news, from CNET, Tesla promises full self-driving autopilot, at least a test version, to be released in a limited way in a month or so. From Popular Mechanics, the world's largest robot, a 60-foot tall, transformer-looking robot that has been built in Japan is nearing completion, and it can now do walking and kneeling gestures. From CNN, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter accept hate speech audits to keep advertisers happy. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter have agreed to allow outsiders to audit how they handle harmful content such as hate speech following a boycott of their platforms by major advertisers. And those are today's technology headlines. From the world of business, CNBC reports Dow Jones Industrial Average closed more than 500 points lower yesterday as pressure on tech stocks increased. Apple's stock fell by 4%. From Fox Business News, Walmart to hire 20,000 workers for holiday rush. Walmart is bracing for an onslaught of online orders this holiday season and will hire more than 20,000 seasonal associates nationwide. From the Wall Street Journal, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell urge more spending to help economy recover from the pandemic. In testimony yesterday, the two top U.S. economic officials told lawmakers that emergency loan programs to support the coronavirus-stricken economy were largely working as intended and that more government spending would be needed to sustain the recovery. Also from the Wall Street Journal, U.S. home sales extended powerful rebound into August. Home sales rose in August for the third consecutive month, fueled by robust demand for luxury homes. And those are your business headlines for today. In health news, Healthline.com reports CDC delays vaccine decision, issues new guidance for holiday season. It's expected that a CDC committee will delay voting on how to prioritize who will receive a coronavirus vaccine first. This as reported by Reuters. The vote had been scheduled for yesterday, but a vote was not made. The CDC has issued COVID-19 guidance for holidays in a new posting on its website, according to a report by CNN. Also from Healthline.com, FDA expected to toughen vaccine guidelines. The Food and Drug Administration is expected to restrict new standards that a COVID-19 vaccine will have to meet before being granted emergency use authorization. That is according to a report by the Washington Post. This may significantly reduce the odds that a vaccine will be available by Election Day. Finally, from Healthline.com, over 11,000 people may have been exposed to COVID-19 while flying. A new report from the CDC finds that as many as 11,000 people may have been exposed to COVID-19 while flying, according to a report by the Washington Post. The CDC has investigated cases where 1,600 people flew when they may have been contagious. From that information, researchers figured out that at least 11,000 people were exposed. That doesn't mean that those people exposed ended up developing COVID-19, only that they were at risk. And those are your health headlines. Moving to world news, here are Reuters news agency's world headlines for the day. U.S.-China tensions take center stage at UN as Trump accuses Beijing of unleashing a, quote, plague, unquote. China calls for global green revolution as Trump goes solo on climate. Canada at crossroads as COVID-19 cases surge. Zimbabwe to gradually reopen schools starting on October 26th. Guatemala's president says he's a high-risk patient after coronavirus diagnosis. And finally, Czech Republic to limit public events as COVID-19 cases spike. And those are your world headlines. As always, we end our broadcast with a look at what we call happy news. These are headlines from across the country of people doing good. And in our happy news headlines today, first, from GoodNewsNetwork.com comes an article with the title, Billionaire Reaches His Goal of Giving Away His Entire Fortune After 38 Years of Secret Donations. In 1982, a wealthy businessman quietly set up a philanthropic foundation. His goal was to secretly give away his entire fortune. Now, 38 years later, he has achieved his goal at the age of 89. Chuck Feeney made his money in the duty-free shopping business, building a nest egg of $8 billion over the course of his life. The Irish American is known for his frugality and humility. Despite his riches, he does not own a car, he rents a small apartment, he flies economy class, and he owns only one pair of shoes. The co-founder of the Duty-Free Shoppers Group managed to keep his charitable activities hidden from the public till 2005 when the opportunity came along to do some good with the publicity. The New Jersey-born businessman decided to cooperate with a journalist to write his biography with an eye toward promoting, quote, giving while living, unquote, to other wealthy people. This week, Feeney's foundation, the Atlantic Philanthropies, finally ran out of money. Good for you, Mr. Feeney. There's extreme inequality in this country, which is a travesty. However, as long as we choose to maintain an economic system where people can earn a lot of money during their lifetime, then I respect those who give it all back to society before they die. Our next happy news story is from KSL News Radio in Provo, Utah, and the headline is, Provo Starts Program of Kindness. Mayor Michelle Cafusi thinks there are at least a couple kinds of kindness. One is a surface kind, she says, which is when, quote, her kids take out the neighbor's trash or shovel their driveway, unquote. But what Provo kindness aims to do is, in Cafusi's words, go deeper. The mission statement on their website and social media is, quote, to cultivate a community of understanding, empathy, connection, and respect, unquote. Cafusi says this is a critical time to do that because the pandemic has wreaked havoc on our mental health. She says, quote, depression and anxiety rates right now with adults are 1 in 3. In January 2019, they were 1 in 10, unquote. So, she continues, quote, the time is now, the need is now to dig deeper, be a little more understanding, put ourselves out there, show our kindness at a higher level. Cafusi says their website, provokindness.org, is a great place to start. She says it gives examples of ways to begin changing your level of kindness within your family, and then bridging out into neighborhoods and the community. I just have to say, that sounds like a great idea. We need more community leaders who think beyond passing legislation and engaging in politics. It is great to see a mayor in a community working to promote something as important and necessary to life as kindness. In our final Happy News article, we have a story from KMUW Public Radio in Wichita, Kansas. The title is A Double Act of Kindness. From writer Amy Giesler Jones, who lost someone close to her, quote, recently my father-in-law passed away, and he'd been living with us in what was a 4-generation household. He was a former military veteran. He had a 20-year career in the military and then went on to become a minister. He was a humble man and would do what he could to help others, end quote. About a week after his death, a member from the church came by to drop off some food. As she was unloading the car, she told the family that when she was shopping for food at the grocery store, a man, a complete stranger, asked her what she was doing with all of that food. Upon hearing that it was a church cooking food for a grieving family, he said, I'll pay for it. The family saw this as a double act of kindness. Not only had the church cooked food for their family, it was cooked with ingredients that were paid for by a generous and kind stranger. Well, Amy, now that you have shared this story with the world and warmed our hearts today, then I would say it is officially a triple act of kindness. And that is your news for September 23rd, 2020. Have a great day.